It was 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. I had just dragged myself home after a 36-hour hospital shift. My feet were so swollen they barely fit inside my shoes. The apartment was clinically clean, unnervingly quiet. He was there. My father, Dr. Michael Harrison, sat in the dark in his leather armchair, motionless, his face carved into stone. He wasn't looking at me, he was staring at my tablet, at my work. He lifted it slightly. "I saw your laptop," he said. His voice was low, controlled, the tone he used in the OR right before a patient coded. "You're throwing away 10 years of discipline." A medical degree, he flicked his wrist, the screen flashing a complex digital sculpture I had spent a month building. "For this," his mouth tightened, "this digital trash. You're an embarrassment." He stood, finally meeting my eyes. "Get out. Have you ever been told your passion is worthless, like it's childish or indulgent? Tell me your story in the comments." I read every one. I didn't cry, I didn't plead. I simply turned, walked into my bedroom, packed a single duffel bag, and abandoned the life I was expected to live. As I stepped out of that old money Lincoln Park brownstone, it finally hit me. It had never been a home, it was a residency, a museum dedicated to the Harrison medical dynasty. My father, Dr. Michael Harrison, was chief of surgery. My mother, Jennifer, chaired the hospital guild. My older brother, Christopher, was the heir apparent, a surgical resident who inhaled the sterile air of the OR like it sustained him. And then there was me, the defect. The one who saw patterns and beauty instead of lab values and charts. Growing up, dinner wasn't dinner, it was grand rounds. We sat at a massive mahogany table while my father interrogated us. "Christopher," he'd say, "differential diagnosis for acute epigastric pain." Christopher would lean forward, alive. "Rule out myocardial infarction first, but more likely acute pancreatitis, cholecystitis, or a perforated ulcer." He glowed. He was my father's reflection. Then the spotlight would swing to me. "Sarah, anatomy midterm, 94. "Yes," my father would say coolly, "and 94 isn't 100, 94 is second place." "The Harrisons are not second place." My mother would smile thinly and realign the silverware. Her entire existence was a performance. Her favorite line, etched into my childhood, was always whispered, "Sarah, what will people think?" I was the liability, the one who, at 15, took a welding class and built an abstract metal bird. I brought it home glowing with pride. My father glanced at it and sneered. "A waste of good steel," he said, returning to his journal. I buried the sculpture in my closet. The white coat ceremony was supposed to be my triumph. My father took the photo, his hand heavy on my shoulder. I smiled, but all I felt was the stiff collar. It wasn't a coat, it was a restraint. I didn't have language for it then, but we weren't a family, we were a brand. We weren't children, we were assets expected to perform. Love wasn't unconditional. It was earned, like a bonus tied to prestige. That night when my father threw me out, I finally understood. He wasn't angry that I was betraying myself. He was furious that I was betraying him. I wasn't his daughter, I was his investment, and I was defaulting. So I left, 25 years old, disowned, $10,000 in savings, a duffel bag that smelled like antiseptic. The first thing I did was walk behind a diner and toss my gray scrubs into a dumpster. I watched them vanish beneath coffee grounds and trash. I inhaled deeply for the first time in days. That night I moved into a shoebox studio in a rough neighborhood, thin walls, cheap rent. I got a job as a barista, irony at its finest. All that prestige, all that pressure, and now I was steaming milk for $8 an hour. This was supposed to be my punishment phase, but the nights belonged to me. With my first paycheck, I bought a refurbished processor. I stopped sleeping. I worked. I poured everything into my art: rage, grief, shame, 25 years of invisibility. I sculpted with light and code, building impossible structures that shouldn't stand. Beautiful, broken. I was alone until I posted one piece on a tiny online art collective. A message appeared. "This isn't just code, this is a soul." His name was Daniel Kim, 27, running the collective from a cramped apartment in Seoul. He didn't see garbage, he saw brilliance. We talked for hours. Then days, then weeks. He understood what it meant to be an artist hiding in a world that didn't care. He found the grant, a new fund for emerging digital artists, one prize. $750,000. "You have to apply," he said. "This isn't a hobby, it's the future." I submitted my portfolio, expecting silence. 6 weeks later, an email arrived that made my hands shake. I had won $750,000. We didn't waste it. Daniel flew to Chicago. We built what we dreamed of, a revolutionary digital gallery with immersive, interactive spaces where artists could finally get paid. We launched on a Friday. By Monday, our servers crashed. Over 1 million visitors, the art world couldn't ignore us anymore. Then Zurich called, a white glove international art fund. They wanted everything, my debut collection and the platform's core tech. 6 months later, the offer arrived, $25 million. I stared at the number. No champagne, no celebration. I bought a one-way ticket out of Chicago. I flew toward warmth, toward Santa Fe. Toward earth and sky and silence. I bought a minimalist adobe estate rising from red desert stone, 22 million, cash. The heart of it wasn't a ballroom. It was a massive studio with a glass wall framing the canyon. The day I walked inside, the silence crushed me. I stood in that palace of art and felt nothing but fraud. This is the winner's secret terror, when you get everything and feel undeserving, when you're just a child playing dress up in a house too big for your fear. I thought of my father, a surgeon. A man who saved lives and me making beautiful things. The guilt nearly drowned me, but work doesn't allow indulgence. The acquisition closed. I ran the innovation hub. I barely slept. I almost missed the email from Art Forum. 3 weeks later, the cover ran, "The $25 million Ghost, How Sarah Harrison Vanished from a Medical Dynasty and Redefined Digital Art." I read it, felt oddly detached, and went back to work. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Unknown Chicago number. I answered. "Hey sis, long time, Christopher," his donor voice, polished, fake. "What do you want, Christopher?" "Wow, straight to business. Just wanted to say congrats. Saw the Art Forum piece, very impressive. And wow, that's a hell of a house you got out there." My stomach turned to ice. There it was. Mom and Dad saw the article. Too, he continued, his voice dripping with false casualness. "And you know, we were all talking. It's been way too long. We were thinking we should all come visit, fly out this weekend. You know, to reconnect, reconnect." The word hung in the air, a perfect glittering lay. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an invasion. They hadn't called when I was disowned. They hadn't called when I was serving coffee and half starving. They hadn't checked to see if I was alive, but now the $25 million ghost had a $22 million house, and suddenly they missed me. They wanted to reconnect. This was the twist, hung the deep twist. The first twist was the money. This second twist was the revelation of their true rotten core, their Tory. Their crime wasn't just cruelty. It was that their love was purely, shamelessly transactional, and the Art Forum article was the first invoice they'd received. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. "Fine," I said. My voice was as flat and hard as the desert floor. "This weekend," I hung up before he could reply. This wasn't a family reunion. It was an audit, and I was finally ready for it. They arrived on Saturday morning. Stepping out of a black rental SUV into the bright high desert sun, they looked out of place. My father, Michael, in a pressed blazer. My mother, Jennifer, in pearls and a silk shell top, Christopher in loafers. They looked like Chicago, rigid and gray, dropped into the warm, earthy colors of Santa Fe. I met them at the door. My mother tried to hug me, a stiff, awkward gesture. I didn't return. "Sarah, you're home," she said, her eyes wide as she stepped into the great room. "It's vast." "It's different from Lincoln Park," I said. They were visibly stunned. I watched them take it all in the 20 ft ceilings, the wall of glass looking out over the canyon. The warm light, the personal human art I'd collected. It was the opposite of our childhood home. Their brownstone was dark, heavy, and cold, filled with furniture that was meant to be looked at, not lived in. My house was light, warm, and personal. I gave them the tour, feeling like a real estate agent in my own home. I was polite, detached. "This is the studio," I said, opening the doors. They just stood there, silent. Christopher walked over to one of my unfinished digital sculptures, a massive swirling form on a bank of monitors. "This is what you do?" he asked. "This is what I do," I said. "Impressive," my father said, but his voice was tight. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at the size of the studio. He was calculating the square footage. We had lunch on the patio. The food was beautiful. A local chef had prepared a southwestern feast, but the tension was so thick you could barely breathe. My mother tried to make small talk. "This salsa is lovely." "Sarah, did you make it?" "It was catered." "Mom?" "Oh, of course." Christopher stared at his plate. My father swirled his water glass, his jaw set, finally, after the plates were cleared. He set his napkin down, he cleared his throat. "Sarah," he began, looking at the mountains, not at me. "We didn't just come here to see the house. Here it is. I thought your brother." He paused, struggling for the words. His private practice is struggling. He took a significant risk. The loans are there significant. I looked at Christopher. He was staring intently at his own hands, his face pale, the golden child, the surgical resident who could do no wrong. I wouldn't even meet my eyes. My mother jumped in, her voice suddenly bright and supportive. We thought, Sarah, given your success. She gestured around at my home, at the canyon, at the clear blue sky. As if all of it was just a financial statement. We thought you could help, she said. An investment, really, to help your brother, to keep the Harrison name strong, and there it was, the man Tarwi. The public self-destruction. It wasn't a reconciliation, it wasn't an apology, it was a business proposal. They hadn't flown across the country to see their daughter. They had flown across the country to see their ATM. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't angry. I saw them for exactly what they were. They didn't come here for me. They came here with a bill. I let the silence sit for a moment, letting their request hang in the warm desert air. I looked at each of them. My mother, Jennifer, twisting her pearls, desperate for a return to the comfortable lie. My brother, Christopher, the golden child, now just a weak man staring at his lap. And my father, Dr. Michael Harrison, the head of surgery, a man who could hold a human heart in his hands but had no idea what to do with one. I felt nothing. No rage, no old familiar pain, just clarity. You didn't come here to reconnect, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. You came here with a bill. My mother started to protest. Sarah, that's not fair. We're your family. No, I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement, a fact. My father's head snapped up. He wasn't used to that word. No, he repeated as if he had misheard. No, I said again, I won't be investing in Christopher's practice. I won't be keeping the Harrison name strong. I'm done with that name. I stood up. They looked so small from where I was standing. I used to be so desperate for your approval. I told them, I spent 25 years tying myself in knots trying to be the second best Harrison. But when you threw me out, you set me free, and I met people who actually see the world for what it is. I thought of my mentor, Mary Thompson, the 60-year-old gallery owner who'd taken me under her wing when I first got to Santa Fe. Mary taught me the difference between your world and mine. She said, you dad, you live an extractive life. Everything is a transaction. You use medicine not to heal, but for status, for money, for control. You don't see Christopher as your son. You see him as a legacy asset that's underperforming. My father's face went white. Christopher flinched. You came here today to extract from me, I continued, but I'm building a generative life. My work, this digital garbage, it builds community. It inspires. It creates new value in the world. I walked to the edge of the patio looking out at the canyon. I am making an investment. Actually, I just finalized the papers. I'm funding a community art studio in Santa Fe, a place for underserved youth, kids who are like I was, kids who are told their passion is a waste of good metal. I'm giving them the tools and the space to build. That is my legacy, Dad, not yours. I turned back to them. They were silent, defeated, finally seeing me clearly. Not as a daughter, but as a power they had lost. The guest rooms are ready, I said, my voice flat, but I think you should leave. My father stood for a second. I thought he would yell, that I'd see the old rage, but there was nothing. Just a cold, empty void. He nodded. Once Jennifer, Christopher, they left. I didn't watch them drive away. It's been 6 months since that day. My studio is no longer empty. It's filled with laughter and chaos. Daniel moved his life here. He runs the platform from the guest house. Mary comes by for wine. On Fridays and on weekends, the kids from the art studio come over. We work on a massive collaborative sculpture. We make a mess. We create. I look at them. At Daniel, at Mary, the family I chose, the family I built, and I feel a sense of peace that no amount of money could ever buy. My name is Sarah Harrison. I was disowned by my family, but I found my legacy, not in the prestige they demanded, but in the blueprint I drew for myself. So what's your blueprint? What are you building? Let me know in the comments.